Back in April of 2018 at PAX East, Square Enix held a special Final Fantasy XV panel where they would unveil a second wave of DLC for the game that would consist of 4 new episodes focusing on Arden, Luna, Aranea, and Noctis. The idea of these additions was to create an alternate ending to the game that could provide a choice for a much happier outcome than what the base game contains. In the end, all of these DLCs were cancelled in November of 2018, apart from episode Arden, and a lot of this alternate narrative was released as a novel titled Dawn of the Future. Now, most people are pretty familiar with this and consider that PAX East panel to be utterly cursed. The cancellation of these DLCs is commonly brought up in discussions of Final Fantasy XV disappointment, but there was something else that was shown during this panel that also never saw the light of day, that I would argue is as disappointing as the DLC cancellation, if not more so. About half of this panel was dedicated to talking about new content that would be coming to the Windows edition of the game, which had only released a month prior, namely mod content and support. Square Enix were clearly very interested in allowing players to create their own content for Final Fantasy XV, as they recognize that games that have official mod support by the developers tend to see prolonged interest, using Bethesda as an example with Fallout and Skyrim. Here they announced the Mod Organizer and Ebony Level Editor, a development tool similar to Bethesda's creation kit for Skyrim and Fallout, designed to create custom weapons, gear, items, character models, UI elements, but most importantly, levels, events, quests, and mini-games, showcasing custom chocobo races, a drivable mech, and even a fully functional golfing minigame. This was planned to be a powerful tool where the hope was that the community would support the game with new content for years to come. It was originally slated to release at the end of 2018, but unfortunately, with the announcement in November that Square Enix would cease development of most of the DLCs for Wave 2, this also meant that the true Mod Organizer and Level Editor were also cancelled. However, mod support was still sort of added into the game though. Steam Workshop support was added, allowing people to upload their mods and easily install them, along with a new mod section that can be found in the game's menu, organizing your workshop mods into categories and allowing you to enable or disable mods on the fly. The Mod Organizer also still released, though it is thought that the version we received was a watered down one compared to what was shown at the PAX East panel. But people still make great use of this, with over 2,500 mods that currently exist for the game. But without the official development tools, the ones that Square Enix showcased during PAX East, it meant that the custom content for the game was limited to weapons, outfits, character models, armors. The bulk of these were all primarily just cosmetic, and the process of creating mods was a little bit more difficult and restricted. For more complex mods like quality of life features and further additions to the game, you'd have to look at Nexus mods or CurseForge, either manually installing them or using a third-party installer like Flagram. Now, believe it or not, considering that I live in the middle of nowhere, I was actually at PAX East 2018 and attended this panel in person. I got to talk to a Square Enix rep about the upcoming 15 content, and what they were most excited about was by far the level editor. They expressed that it will hopefully mean that Final Fantasy XV will be played for years to come, as players will be able to create entirely new scenarios, dungeons, locations, enemies, and gameplay elements, where they told me that the team used Bethesda's mod support as a source of inspiration. I was told by this person that the team had already developed a bunch of cool things using this tool, like the golfing minigame we saw, but also new dungeons and quests that they were really passionate about. It makes me think that if this tool had released, we may have gotten some mod content that was developed by actual members of the staff. Now, although 2018 is a while ago, what I remember clearly about the conversation was just how enthusiastic and excited this person was for the possibilities this tool was going to introduce. It seemingly had a ton of potential. It's a real mystery why this tool got cancelled though, considering that we actually got to see it functioning and in use, even though I'm sure some of this footage had been edited. While it ultimately makes sense why the DLC episodes were scrapped, as no footage of them was shown during the panel, and it's very likely that only 2 of them were in development by November of 2018, the level editor looked fairly complete and already quite complex for a work-in-progress build. This was new territory for Square Enix though. They'd never developed a tool like this before for public use, or had even offered mod support for one of their games to this degree. To be honest, it's kind of surprising they'd even attempt to make this a thing, as Final Fantasy is kind of the last game you'd expect to receive an almost Bethesda-level mod tool and support. Really, I don't think Final Fantasy is the right kind of game to receive such a thing, given that 15 really isn't a sandbox open-world RPG like Skyrim is, and maybe this was something that Square Enix realized. However, the game had released back in 2016, and interest in Final Fantasy XV had plummeted. While some either returned for the PC release in 2018 or picked it up for the first time, I'm sure people weren't in hordes to play the game, so it's likely that the release of a tool like this was just way too late on. Also, while sales for the DLC episodes were never made public, I definitely speculate that sales weren't great. Final Fantasy XV is either a love it or hate it kind of game, and while it definitely did sell a buttload of copies, a little over 10 million, I'm sure there are a ton of people who were immensely disappointed and just didn't continue to play it. Square also released a full-blown multiplayer mode for the game in 2018 known as Comrades. Clearly, a lot of effort went into this mode, so much so that Square decided to release a standalone version of Comrades itself. The thing is though, people didn't care, and I don't think really anyone wanted a multiplayer component to Final Fantasy XV. So in the end, Comrades absolutely flopped. Otherwise, if sales were completely booming for the game's prior DLCs, Hajime Tabata didn't end up leaving Square Enix due to indifferences with the company's direction, and the Comrades multiplayer mode was a massive success, then I'm sure the extra DLCs and Ebony level editor wouldn't have been cancelled. It's a real shame though, because I'm absolutely certain that had this tool released, there probably would have been an effort to recreate at least parts of Versus 13's vision into Final Fantasy XV. People are still in 2026 obsessed with Nomura's original vision of the game, and I have no doubts that a dedicated few would have made it their life's mission to insert some of Versus back into the game using this tool. There was also one other feature shown at this panel that didn't make it: user treasures. This was going to be an online component that would allow players to hide a treasure anywhere in the world for other players to find if they had the function enabled. The longer the treasure hadn't been found, the better the item you'd receive. Now, I can imagine a system like this would have led to a bunch of problems, so honestly it's not surprising that Square Enix never mentioned this again after PAX East. So those are two lesser known pieces of content that were shelved alongside the DLCs. I rarely see anyone ever mentioning specifically the level editor though, and it's the type of thing that could have truly expanded upon the game if enough people were interested to create content for it. Unfortunately though, this is just another dark and depressing piece of Final Fantasy XV's history. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. Be sure to slippity slap that like button, it helps me out more than you know, and subscribe to the channel to keep up with everything going on here. A big shout out to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members. I appreciate the ongoing support. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll chat again real soon.